everyone. My name is Cynthia Bernardes. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining the third Lab Chat in our 2019 series about the AAAS Science and Technology Fellowships Workshop. Excuse me. I'm Cynthia Bernardes, as I mentioned, and I am Program Manager with the S&T Policy Fellowships, and I will be your moderator for today's chat. The 2019 Live Chat series is an opportunity for you to ask fellows questions. So today I'm joined by fellows Ramon Bartholomew, Marguerite Matthews, to share their thoughts on career and professional opportunities for fellows. But before we dive into our conversation, I'd like to share a few important announcements and features of the fellowships. A recording of this live chat, as well as additional details about the eligibility requirements, the application process, and program areas can be found on the fellowship's website. So the 2019 Live Chat series will feature one chat each month of the application season. So today's topic is career and professional opportunities for fellows. Next month, we'll chat with fellows about what it's like to be a fellow. So you can register for one, some, or all of the chats. And as noted before, all chats are recorded and made available on our website for later viewing. So in case you haven't heard, the application is now open and will close on Friday, November 1st. Feel free to watch one of the two previous live chat recordings to see a short walkthrough of the application portal to see what to expect from the application this year. So today, we're curious, what feature of the STPF fellowships are you most interested in experiencing? So go on ahead and respond to the poll. All right. This is great. So we have top rated are the professional development opportunities. We have 9% interested in experiencing life in the federal government, deepening an understanding of how policy and science relate. Wow, a whopping 71% of you all. All right, and then of course, as far as the other features of the fellowships, networking with other fellows and living in Washington, D.C. Oh, so most of you all want to take a deeper dive into understanding how policy and science relate, which is great. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. As mentioned, you'll get all of these wonderful features in the fellowships when you apply, if you are accepted. But for those who are particularly interested in the professional development aspect of our program, I'd like to introduce Melissa Morris, our Professional Development Director, who will walk us through the many benefits of our professional development offerings. So go ahead and take it away, Melissa.
Thanks so much, Cynthia. I'm glad to be here today to talk about the STPF Professional Development offerings. As part of our fellowship experience, all fellows have access to an extensive array of professional development opportunities, beginning with a 2-week orientation for all fellows at the beginning of the fellowship year. Orientation is designed to be an intense learning opportunity that acclimates fellows to working in the federal government, and topics span anywhere from the basics of different branches of government to the budget process to science policy. And all of our sessions are delivered by authorities in their field. So for example, last year we had a keynote speaker, former Secretary of Energy, Ernie Moniz. This year we'll have the Director of OSTP provide a keynote speech for our orientation. So we're very excited and proud of our orientation offering. But I think one of the most important things about orientation is it's an opportunity for fellows to get to know each other and to network and to build some camaraderie as they enter into their fellowship experience. In addition to orientation, we have our monthly professional development program, which we have workshops covering an array of topics tied to our main learning themes, which are policy in the federal government, communication, leadership, and networking and career strategies. Some examples of our workshops this year include political dynamics in the 116th Congress. This was put on by the Government Affairs Institute associated with Georgetown University. We have workplace negotiation skills, diversity and inclusion, and leading with emotional intelligence. So that's just a snapshot of some of the monthly professional development offerings that we have. We also have an annual career summit, which highlights our alumni working in different sectors, such as alumni working in the federal government, alumni working for nonprofits, alumni working in industry, and then alumni working in academia. And they discuss how the fellowship has honed their skills in policy and how they've taken what they've learned from the fellowship and brought it back to the different sectors that they're currently working in. In addition, our Career Summit has technical sessions like resume writing, informational interviewing, or how to use LinkedIn to find your next opportunity. In addition, most fellows receive travel and training funds, which they can utilize to pursue personalized professional development, such as conferences or other events that are of personal interest to them. One recent addition to our professional development program, which we're very proud of, and it just launched about a month and a half ago, is the opportunity for fellows to engage in individualized professional coaching. So we have negotiated with several career coaches to provide our fellows that are interested with individualized coaching at a specialized rate. And for some of our fellows, they may be able to use their training funds for this purpose. So in addition, STPF sponsors a variety of affinity groups, which are an integral component of the professional development experience. The networks are self-directed, self-defined, and they provide a very important forum for fellows to meet and discuss areas of interest. And this can be their areas of academic interest or their areas of personal interest. So for example, this year we have over 20 affinity groups. They include a snapshot of these would be agriculture and nutrition, energy and climate, neuropolicy, science diplomacy, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then as part of the affinity group offerings, many of our affinity groups work together to put on symposia at the end of the year. And these symposia are AAAS sponsored, and they're public events, and they're very popular and very much important for AAAS, STPF, and the public working in certain realms. And then finally, at the end of the year, we close every year with a year-end summit and send-off. And the year-end summit and send-off is really all about the fellows and gives them an opportunity to get up and highlight all of the great things they've done, some of the big projects they've worked on, and sort of highlight to everyone else, you know, not only saying goodbye and moving on to their next steps, but also talking about the great things they've accomplished during the fellowship. So those are some of the great things that we offer through STPF, in addition to many of the things that may get offered through wherever your host office is. So with that, Cynthia, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, Melissa, thank you so much for providing all of that overview of professional development. It is truly valuable, and fellows have definitely shared their feedback on how much it has been a value to their fellowship experience. So thank you again, Melissa. Well, today I am super excited to hear from our guests. We have Ramon and Marguerite here. You can submit your questions via chat at any time by clicking the question box in your menu and typing your questions there. We really want your questions. And in your message, you can indicate which person or people you would like the question to be directed to. So again, during today's chat, we will focus on questions about career and professional opportunities for fellows. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, and questions about topics outside the chat's theme may be answered via the chat box. All right, so now I am excited to introduce our panelists today. I'm gonna wait for them to show up on our screen here, but Yes. So we have, well, right now, we'll have Marguerite, well, I'll introduce in the order that they are in or showing. So we have Dr. Marguerite Matthews. She's currently a program specialist at NIH in the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience, Workforce Diversity. As a 2016-18 fellow, she was in the Office of Extramural Research within the Office of the Director at NIH. She examined trends in the biomedical research workforce to enhance programs and policies that impact early career researchers in all biomedical disciplines. She received her PhD from the University of Pittsburgh. We also have Dr. Ramon Bartholomew. He is currently an assistant professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Utah. As a 2015-16 STPF fellow at the Department of Education in the Office of STEM, he worked with the Office of Civil Rights and the co-STEM interagency working groups to advocate for better policies in STEM education. He received his PhD from Western Michigan University. All right, and so with that, I don't know where Ramon has gone, but right now, since I have you, Marguerite, oh, there you are. Awesome, so we have both Ramon and Marguerite here. So again, today's live chat is career and professional development, professional opportunities for fellows. So here's our first question. How has participating in the fellowships benefited your career in a way you were not expecting? And so we'll have Marguerite go first, and then we'll have Ramon.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's an interesting question. So I didn't really know what to expect from the fellowship. I mean, hearing all of the great benefits, many of which Cynthia just mentioned, and things that you can read on the website. Every fellowship experience is different, depending on where your host office is, which agency you're in. It can all vary differently, and I just didn't know what to expect for my personal experience. So everything was not necessarily what I expected. I found a host office that turned out to be a perfect match for my interests, my skills, and the camaraderie that I formed both at my agency and within the fellowship was truly life-changing. I have made wonderful friends, but also colleagues, people that I can count on for advice, for mentorship. It's really priceless, I think, and they sell the networking piece a lot, but I certainly got above and beyond what I was told I would get. And even at the bare minimum, I think what you can get from the fellowship in terms of networking is amazing. So it was all very new, and I love my current job, and I think that wouldn't have been possible without the fellowship, the experience that I gained, and the network and the people that I could just talk to about. I have all these things that I want to do, but I don't know how to hone it, and getting that sort of help. So there's so much that you can anticipate from the fellowship, but you'll get so much more than that, I think, once you're here.
Ramon?
Yeah, I think for me, it was really professional polish. There were things that I didn't really know how to do before I was a fellow. I mean, this included just having Mary Crane come in and tell us about, proper dining etiquette and the kind of suit we should be wearing. So really one of the biggest takeaways for me from the fellowship, as odd as it might sound, is actually getting that professional development in terms of how do you act as a professional in the world? What does it mean to not be in academia? I think a lot of times there are different standards of behaviors and interactions and how you work with people between different sectors. And for me, having that exposure in the policy fellowship really taught me that. I also learned a great deal about the government and how it works and sometimes how it doesn't work. And that has been a very powerful set of knowledge that I've taken with me when I went into the private sector, and then now as I've returned home to academia as a professor.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So now I want to hear from you all, the audience members. So please type in your questions. As you can see on our slide, we have one more fellow, fellow alumni that is scheduled to join the chat here today, Amina Sharda. And so she is our executive branch fellow at the National Science Foundation. And so I'm going to introduce her, and then hopefully her video will come up and she can participate in the conversation. So Amina, as mentioned, current fellow at the National Science Foundation in the Office of Polar Programs. She works in the Arctic Sciences section on efforts to coordinate national and international research that supports improving the resilience and sustainability of northern communities. Following the fellowship, she will be an assistant professor at Scripps Institution of Oceanography in San Diego. She received her PhD from the University of Connecticut. So we're going to welcome Amina as soon as she has her webcam up. But we have a question here that I'm excited about. Oh, here we are, Amina.
Hi. Sorry about that, guys.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. So you weren't around to answer the kickoff question. However, I think now that we have a question from our audience members, I think you're going to be the first one to answer this one. Let's see.
Hey.
Well, let's see. I'm going to read the question. So the question is, how did you leverage networking and professional development opportunities during your fellowship? So I'll ask that again. How did you leverage networking and professional development opportunities during your fellowship? So, Amina, are you up for taking this first one?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So for me, it was really important to keep a foot in the research community. And one of the reasons I wanted to come to and do the fellowship was that I wanted to a bit of broaden my perspective and grow my scientific community. So as a researcher, we tend to narrow as we go further and further into our studies. And I really wanted to have that broader view and connect with other people, both the US research community and the broader international community. And being at NSF in the polar programs as a fellow in the Arctic section, I managed to really connect with researchers across the United States as well as internationally. And I would have never been able to do that as well if I was just an academic. And I think that the other thing that was really, I learned it very soon after joining NSF, everybody always responds to nsf.gov emails. So it makes it very easy to communicate with people and get feedback about my own research ideas beyond just the fellowship.
Awesome. Ramon?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, when I was a fellow, I did a lot of work with other fellows. So, I mean, I was constantly on the Hill talking with people about the education policy that they were pursuing. I knew folks who were working in other executive branches that we got to connect on. So for me, I found that opportunity to experience those different parts of the government to be really powerful. I also actually spent a number of times at the NSF as well for events that they had. And I did work with one of my other colleagues over there who was a fellow who I've since stayed in contact with and had that continuity of the network that I built as a fellow. But for me, that was really powerful. It was just getting exposure to all these different organizations across DC.
Awesome. How about you, Marguerite?
Yeah, as a fellow and working for a government agency, I mean, people listen. You can work at the NIH, for instance, and the second you say you're a fellow, now everybody wants to talk to you. Oh, I was a fellow, so we should have lunch and let's talk. And oh, you're a fellow, so we need to connect you with this group and this group because you're going to be on the job market soon. So it's amazing just how willing people are to open themselves up to you, knowing that you're a fellow. And I think if you're open to meeting people and getting involved in interagency committees or working groups, or anytime I had an opportunity to go down to NSF, make the long trek from Maryland down to Virginia, I was always up for it because I wanted to meet as many people as possible because I didn't really know what I wanted to do afterwards. So having the opportunity to network with so many people is awesome. But I think one thing just to sort of be mindful in terms of how you go about that, you'll hear from many fellows, especially if you get into the program, that you should network a certain way. And I think you just have to decide how you're going to go about it. Some people schedule lunches and, you know, one fellow alum told us if you're having lunch by yourself, then you're not doing it right. I had lunch by myself many times, and I still had an opportunity to network a lot. There's plenty of curated networking events, but also just meeting people on my own. And so I think any way you decide to go about it, you will never not have the opportunity to meet people with different disciplines, different policy areas, but that still want to come together to see you succeed. And if they don't know, if they're not the person to talk to, they will more than likely connect you with somebody else. So the opportunities to network are endless in the fellowship.
Awesome. Thank you, Marguerite. So our next question, how often do fellows go straight into government employment after the fellowship? How did the fellows here move to their next step? So I'm actually curious to hear from Ramon. After he completed his fellowship, what happened? How did you transition over to your next employment opportunity?
Yeah, great question. The first thing I'll say is when I did my fellowship, I did it for 1 year. I did have the opportunity to do it for a second year, but the reason why I chose to go into full-time employment was I was really concerned about the transitioning in administration and what was going to happen to the office that I was located in the second year. And in retrospect, you realize that, life is long and there are short periods of time where you actually get to do interesting stuff. And for me, I would have taken advantage of the full 2 years of the potential opportunity rather than the 1 year. So, one thing I want to say is that you don't want to immediately, be jumping the starting gun for the race to get a full-time job, because the fellowship is such a unique opportunity. You get to learn things, you get to make mistakes, you get to chase down projects that might not be profitable, that might not be, in the end, might not work out. And that's okay, because that's what you do as a fellow. So one thing I'd say is don't be too excited about employment. I mean, be thinking about it, be networking, but really savor and take advantage of the full fellowship opportunity. And in reality, for us folks in the executive branch, we also have the opportunity to do a 1 year in Congress and work for a representative. And I really highly suggest that you look into and take advantage of the full fellowship experience. I certainly wish I had. I mean, my career is fine, but looking backwards, it would have been great if I had all the years of the fellowship when I only took advantage of one of them. So that's something I would have changed. But for me, I bounced around quite a bit afterwards. So I did look into government employment. The U.S. Department of Education was where I was positioned at. The Office of STEM was actually brought into existence by President Barack Obama, who I actually had the chance to meet. And random stuff like that will happen as a fellow too, where you'll get to meet really cool people. So for me, I started looking around and I found a position and I went for it, tried it out. It was at a nonprofit doing physics advocacy. Ended up not being the best fit for me, so I kept looking around as well, and I ended up transitioning from that into the private sector. So in the private sector, I worked with universities across the country. So I was using my experience in the Department of Education, as well as my experience as a PhD, to help university administrators. And it was partway through that I realized, well, instead of training administrators on how to train faculty, maybe I could just be one myself. So at that point, I decided to look into becoming a professor. And I was really concerned about it because I didn't do traditional postdocs that people do. So I assumed that I would have had a really hard time and that many universities wouldn't consider hiring me. But what I found in applying to universities is that my experience in the government was actually seen as a really powerful thing. And I always talked about that I had experience working with the folks who fund us and the folks who actually make the policy that governs the work that we do. And I found that to be very powerful and very well respected. So all the campuses that I visited for interviews were all very excited about the fact that I was a fellow and wanted to know more. And in fact, at the institution that I ended up at, the University of Utah, during my interview, I actually met with a group of students, and a bunch of them are now applying for AAAS policy fellowships. And they just formed a policy graduate student STEM group, which is really awesome. So for me, it was really keeping the doors open. And I spent 4 years in DC, and I just tried on different hats. I went into the nonprofit sector. I went into the private sector. And for me, I took all those experiences with me. It completely reshaped my research agenda, which would have been completely different had I not had these experiences. And then I took that, and now I'm an assistant professor of physics and astronomy, focused on physics education and also policy issues here at the University of Utah. So that's my story.
Awesome. I know, Marguerite, your host office hired you. Was staying in the government sort of what you wanted to do?
Not necessarily. So for those maybe who don't know, when you're a fellow at the National Institutes of Health, you are hired as a federal employee, whereas some other offices like the National Science Foundation, you would be hired as a contractor. And there's pluses and minuses to both of those. But the nice thing about being a federal employee at the NIH is they want to keep you. They've invested all of this in you, and they would like to get you back in as a permanent federal employee instead of just one on a term contract. So my office really wanted to hire me directly, but due to the change of administration and the hiring freeze, it was next to impossible to get hired because our agency was slowly allowing hires. And so they hired the most immediate needs, so health professionals to work in the clinical center and some other spots. So I ended up getting hired on at the end of my fellowship as a contractor, but working within my host office. So it was great. So the only thing that really changed was the pay, some other responsibilities that I had to my contracting company, which was Ripple Effect, and a former fellow is one of the leaders there. So it was a really awesome opportunity, and I loved working in my office, but then I got an opportunity to transition to another institute at NIH, my current position now at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. But when you're in the federal government, it's kind of like a lot of people don't want to leave. I didn't necessarily want to stay in the government. I just wanted a good job and a job that I liked. And it just so happened that I found that working in my office and now in my current position. I probably actually will try to transition back into academia eventually and help run programs there to help with the workforce development from sort of the inside instead of kind of approaching it from the top at a federal level. But you'll find that a lot of people, especially fellows who get placed at NIH, want to stay at NIH, and it's really easy too because they want to hire fellows, and a lot of fellows that come into NIH end up staying. So I've met tons of fellows who were fellows back in the early 2000s, and they've been at NIH ever since, moving around to different places, but staying within. So if you want a government position, I think it's really easy to get in. And then once you have a government position, you can move all over. If you start at NIH, you can go to FDA, CDC, other places. So it has its pluses and its minuses. So some people made their decision based on wanting a federal position long term in terms of going between NIH or NSF. But the possibilities are endless. The fellowship does a great job of telling you how to get a federal position in terms of applying through USA Jobs. And if any of you have ever tried to apply for it blindly, you probably were very frustrated. And the fellowship is a great way to figure out the tricks to get in and get the position that you want.
Got it. Thank you. And then really briefly, because I want to hear Amina's sort of story, whether you and I, we have spoke before about, your career trajectory, where you want to go post-fellowship. But I'd like to hear from you, sort of when you're currently still a fellow, but what were you thinking when you were applying for opportunities after the fellowship?
Yeah, so I guess my story is kind of boring. I am still actually a fellow, so I'm a fellow till through end of August. And so because I wanted an academic position in a research heavy institution, I had to start really early and kind of jump on all the opportunities that were a good fit for me. I was very selective in terms of where I wanted to be and what kind of institution and what kind of researchers I wanted to be surrounded by. So I had to keep an eye on from the get-go. So I started looking, as soon as I started the fellowship, I started looking at what opened up. So I applied for the Scripps position in January of 2018. So that was just a few months after starting the fellowship. And I officially on paper started, but not physically or not salary-wise, because I can't, started July 1st, which was a couple weeks ago. So that just gives you an idea of the timelines for some of those faculty positions. So if you're interested in an academic position, then I would start really looking into this fairly early on. what the advantage of doing this that way is that I don't really have a transition period between the two. As soon as I'm done with the fellowship, I start in San Diego right away. The great thing about being at NSF is that I really could talk to the program directors who are working with a lot of those institutions and getting a little bit of a background about, you know, what type of people are they looking for, who should I talk to, which institutions, what are all the rumors that are going on in different departments. So it's been great like that, but that's my trajectory. It's been pretty straightforward there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so next question is, oh my, all right, we thank you for submitting your questions. Please continue to submit your questions. So our next question is, did any of you have experience in policy before the fellowship? If not, what was a great experience that helped you be successful in the fellowships? So Ramon, let's take this one.
So I actually did have policy experience. I did my PhD in physics education, which I had a large policy component to it. I had worked with the LGBT plus physicists in the American Physical Society on creating policies for gender and sexual minorities at the American Physical Society annual conferences. So that was the experience that I had in terms of policy that I brought with me to the fellowship, which certainly was helpful. What was the second half of that question, Cynthia?
The second half was, what was a great experience that helped you be successful in the fellowships if you did not have policy experience before the fellowship?
Marguerite or Amina, could one of you take that?
Sure.
Well,
I can.
Oh, sorry, Amina. So I was just actually telling some graduate students and postdocs at a conference last week. I got interested in policy because I have a big mouth, and if something was going on that I didn't like, I was the one to speak up about it. And when you become vocal, people notice, and then people want you to get involved. So while I didn't have formal policy experience, I certainly had a lot of experience working with various committees at my graduate institution, the University of Pittsburgh. So being on the Commonwealth Committee and just things that were going on in Pennsylvania that affected our education, and involved in the student government. So things that were happening just from a workforce professional development standpoint, getting involved in that way. So I think there's a lot of ways to get experience in making a difference. I don't think it always has to be policy driven, but how do you want to make an impact? How can you work as a civil servant to make a change? And so working at a local level is great, but I wanted to see how big up I could go and think about things on a broader level. So there's a lot of things that you can get involved in. And I think just being involved and showing some commitment to some sort of service is really a way to get involved. And I think that looks good on your application.
Thank you. Amina, did you have policy experience prior to the fellowship?
Zero. So I think we have a good gradient here. I had zero policy experience before the fellowship, but I did have policy interest because my research had a strong policy implication. So so after I did my PhD, which is in oceanography, and that may confusing, I went as a postdoc at the Harvard School of Public Health and Applied Science, at Harvard School of Public Health, and then I moved to the Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Excuse me. Hey guys, thank you. And then I moved on to the Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, where I was researching the impact of hydro development and climate change on Inuit health. And so as a result of those, I had a lot of questions from the communities on the ground in the Arctic and subarctic was, okay, so what should we do about those findings that you have? So I kept getting policy questions from people because these were policy decisions, like what should you do about an environmental problem? How should you address them? So there's a lot of issues that come into kind of balancing out, policy decisions that may have economic implications with the environmental implication, with the human health implications. So I wanted the fellowship to give me a little bit better understanding of what those different balancing acts that people have to make.
Got it. Thank you. There's a question that asks, did you get the opportunity to conduct public outreach or work with the general public? I'm not sure whether that's before or after the fellowship, but let's say during the fellowship, did anyone have the opportunity to conduct public outreach or work with, oh, excuse me. All right. So during the fellowship, did anyone conduct public outreach or work with the general public? So I'll give that to Marguerite.
I did public outreach as it related to my job. I got to go to conferences and talk about some policies that affect trainees, graduate students, postdocs, and early career scientists. I didn't really have a lot of opportunity to do educational outreach, which is something I was really passionate about and involved in as a graduate student and as a postdoc. And I don't think it was necessarily because there was a lack of opportunities. It just was harder to be involved in. But it actually, as part of my job now, I do educational outreach, and it's actually part of my job duties. So I'm really glad that I kind of got to do something more formal, and I'm the one who gets to plan the activities. So.
Awesome. Next question. How has being a STPF fellow helped you or fellows you know return to academia? So, Amina.
You guys.
I'll let you have that one.
Oh boy, I think I kind of touched a bit on this earlier when I talked about, I think, so being at NSF, it's kind of like being in academia. You still keep a foot in there. You're exposed to and talking to program directors, many of large fraction of whom are rotators, so they're still academics, they're still doing research. It really gaining perspective as to where your little field fits into the big picture, and it kind of makes you better at taking rejection. So you often like write those proposals for academia, and then you send it out and you think that your field is the field, and it's really difficult if you've been so narrow for a long time to see really where it fits in the grand scheme of science. And so being at NSF and reading through so many proposals and talking to so many people really helped me better understand where my field fits into the bigger picture. So when I'm writing the section on proposals about broader impacts of my research and the intellectual merit of my research, it's a lot easier for me to have this like really wide perspective. What does this mean for the scientific community? What does this mean for the United States? And so that was like one of the biggest thing that I learned. And as you know, academia getting funding is the number one thing that you need to do to keep your research going. And so you do get good perspective from what it takes to write a good proposal and what it takes to get research funding and get organized. To, you know, I'm an oceanographer, so we have a lot of logistics going on. So it's just understanding, you know, all those different entities, both in the United States and worldwide, that are working together to make those large projects happening. And you never see them from that side when you are not at NSF. So I would say that just understanding the funding landscape in the US and internationally.
Ramon, you're sort of in a, well, of course, in a different position than Amina, but can you speak to, or can you sort of speak to what you, in terms of academia, if you have a message for those that want to return to academia after the fellowship, or if you know anyone that had gone to academia post-fellowship, because of your unique situation and trajectory, do you have a comment to say on that?
Sure. So when I left the fellowship, I had no intention of becoming a professor. I think while I was a fellow, I applied to maybe 1 or 2 faculty positions. I got an interview and I turned it down. So I completely decided against it. And I had decided that I wanted to continue in the world of policy or advocacy. You know, when I was consulting with university administrators, I with the encouragement of a colleague, because I sort of thought that I could never become a professor, and it was one of my colleagues that was like, no, you should try. So I had to actively put my foot back in. So I took some data that I had written a conference proceeding. I went to a conference, co-presented a poster, and I used that opportunity to start workshopping my CV with different leaders in my field that I contacted. I'm lucky I happen to know a lot of leaders in my field, and my field's very small, so it's probably easier to do it in physics education than, you know, say a field that's much bigger. And then once I did that, I then put myself in the job market. And at that point, what I had to do was frame all of my previous experiences in terms of how it would make me a successful faculty member. So one of the biggest strands that I said is as far as mentorship goes, I'll be a powerful mentor because I've actually experienced the government, nonprofit, and private sector, which are the majority of the areas where students are going to go, because the majority of graduate students don't become professors. They don't go into academia. So one of the argument strands that I use was that this experience empowered me to be a strong mentor for people that were going to consider other pathways. And then with the consulting that I did, since I was consulting with university administrators, I actually had a whole, just like Amina has all this amazing knowledge about NSF, I had all this amazing knowledge about how universities work. So it's a matter of leveraging the unique knowledge that you have in order to show how you're going to be an asset. And you know, if I heard Amina correctly, it was really her insights into how funding works. And for me, it was my insights into how the research process and award grant cycle works located at the universities that made me a strong contender to actually get a position. But the key thing that academic positions honestly are going to look for in STEM, unless you're at a four-year college, is your ability to secure funding. So for me, it really was having that knowledge about the grant cycle, about, you know, indirect cost policies and how do you manage an award. And I would also talk largely about project management, because one thing I learned as a fellow and then as a consultant was project management, which is something you don't necessarily get trained in as a grad student and might not even learn as a postdoc, but it is something you get trained in as a person in a fellowship or in the private sector. And for me, I run my research group, you know, my research group's only a few months old, but I run my research group very much like, you know, a government or private sector entity. So it's very efficient. We stick to timelines. We actually, you know, we work 9 to 5. We don't work, you know, these weird all the time hours. So for me, I took that with me, which seems to be pretty useful.
Oh, and I wanted to say one more thing is that what was important to me too is to maintain my research productivity despite the fact that I was a AAAS fellow. I maintained my affiliation with my research institution, which was Harvard School of Engineering Applied Sciences, and I continued to do research on the side. So my part-time job on weekends was to actually continue to write papers and publish them. So that was key also.
So, thank you. Let's backtrack a little bit. There's a question from an audience member wanting to know about moving to DC. What was it like to move to DC and transition into DC? And did any of you bring your families, family members? So I think I'm biased because I am program manager for Amina. So can you take this question first?
Sure. Well, so my move to the DC area was actually 2 steps. So the first year, so I have a husband and 2 children. My son is 11 and a half, and my daughter is just turned 8. And my husband had a job in Pittsburgh, and the family was not ready to move. So I was in the DC area on my own during weekdays, and I would go back to Pittsburgh on weekends. My in-laws lived in the DC area, so I did that way. And my husband eventually got a job in DC, and so he also moved. He works for DOJ. And so the family moved my second year, and we lived in the DMV area. So for us, I would say that it was both complicated and easy at the same time, because we had family. It was very easy to move someplace and just not to have to worry about figuring out where is the best area to live. So we live in Reston, Virginia.
Thank you. Ramon?
Yeah, so I mean, I moved actually from Finland to DC, so I actually had nothing. I had 2 suitcases and a backpack, and that was basically all I owned. So for me, I just found an apartment. I found a roommate on Craigslist. My roommate ended up being the chief of staff for Ernest Moniz at the Department of Energy, very randomly enough. And then I just walked, you know, I walked to the Department of Education every day. I could see the Capitol from where I live. So I mean, I really liked moving there because I had lived in rural Finland, which is its own experience. And going from rural Finland to the capital of the US was a big difference. But, you know, I came just on my own, and, you know, I had to make friends from scratch and everything. And you know, the biggest thing that I miss about DC are the friends that I made. So now that I live in Salt Lake.
Marguerite?
Yeah, I moved to Maryland, since that's where NIH is located. I have not lived in DC, but I came from Portland, Oregon. So it was a cross country trip. I sold all of my gave all of my furniture away, and just put my suitcases in the car, and drove out to Maryland. So I ended up staying with family when I first moved here. I was lucky enough to have them, and they allowed me to stay until I found a place. And I ended up staying a lot longer than I expected for various reasons. And then I just recently bought a house in Maryland. So I was just telling Cynthia earlier, I'm like a 10-minute drive from my office. And if you've ever been to DC or surrounding areas, you know that traffic can be crazy. It's probably better to take the metro, but the metro is not exactly feasible given where I live and where work is. It's very close drive-wise, but on the metro, it is like going all across the world before you get back to the other side. So yeah, it's the fellows, like, if you come for orientation or come for finalist week, if you make it that far, they'll plug you in all the listservs of housing and things like that. All you have to do is know one fellow and ask about housing.
That's right.
You'll get 1,000 different answers. If you want to be in Virginia, if you want to be in DC, if you want to be in Maryland, and any one of the counties, there are plenty of people. I did move by myself, so I was very flexible in sort of my housing situation. But it turned out really well. The only thing I wish is that I had lived in DC for the fellowship to be closer to happy hours and other fellows. But hey, you can't beat living with family and paying next to no rent. So.
All right, for the interest of time, I'm going to combine these questions, and I'll have someone answer. So, which branches of government did you apply to for the fellowships, or what made you apply to the executive branch? And from your knowledge of the fellowship, in terms of your networks, do you think that it's a good opportunity for mid-career professionals to move into the government policy space? So, so those are two separate questions, but I'm sort of combining them into one. One, what made you apply to the executive branch fellowships? And then the next is it a good experience for a mid-career professional to move into the government policy space? So do I have any takers?
I only applied to the executive branch. I had zero interest in being on the Hill. While I find the legislative process very interesting to watch on C-SPAN, I had no actual desire to be in the midst of all of that craziness. I enjoy policy. I do not enjoy politics. So I was absolutely not going to apply to the legislative branch, although I feel like there's a lot of great opportunities to learn there. I also didn't want to know a mile's worth of information widthwise and only, sort of an inch deep. So I only applied to the executive branch. The judicial branch only had like one fellow, and I didn't get a good sense of what that situation would be like. So yeah, it was just the executive fellowship, and agency-wise, really only NIH and NSF that I thought I would find opportunity to do workforce development and professional development policy, which is what I was interested in, or education policy as it relates to STEM. So that's sort of how I targeted my application.
Got it. Okay, for the interest of time, since you answered the which branch fellowship you applied for, can either Ramon or Amina respond to the question of mid-career opportunity? So Amina?
So I can talk about mid-career opportunities for academics. I think that, so if you're an academic in your mid-career and you're interested in spending some time at NSF, I would say that your AAAS fellowship is probably a good way to do it, because unlike rotating into the National Science Foundation, that requires there's like a wait time in between when you can leave and apply for grants. There is no leave time for the AAAS fellowship. So as soon as you leave, you can start applying for NSF grants. And then there's like a bunch of conflict issues that you run into when you're a rotator and you've managed a lot of proposals. So you can get a fairly similar experience of NSF funding system mid-career without the implications for not being able to apply for proposals right away. So I would say that for these people, I can say that it's probably a good opportunity, even though they don't necessarily think that way. So we had a couple of fellows who are professors who came and did the AAAS fellowship for their sabbatical, tenured professor. So I thought that was pretty neat. I can't speak about other type of mid-career.
Thank you. So we are running out of time. And so for our final question, I'd like for the panelists to think about, if someone is unsure about applying to the fellowships, for someone who's unsure about how the fellowship will impact their career, what advice would you give? So I'll read that question again. For someone who's unsure about how the fellowship will impact their career, what advice would you give? And so I'd like you guys to take a moment. I'll start with Amina, then go on to Ramon, and then go on to Marguerite. And if you can briefly share your advice.
I think that one of the best way to kind of gauge, so the AAAS experience, and that's something I learned, is very person dependent. Really depends on who you are and where you go and what your personal experience is. And I think that in order to have an idea of how the fellowship shapes different people's trajectories, speaking to as many different former fellow as you can possibly reach would at least give you an idea of the range and of experience that people can have. So I would say start there and see where do you think it will be beneficial to you as an individual, as in your growth.
Careers and lives are long, and I think it's really important to take opportunities to explore and experience different things. I mean, just for the value of being a person, but also for the value of your career. So I would really suggest apply, see what happens. And the fact of the matter is, maybe you get a really cool postdoc and you also get a AAAS. Well, take the AAAS and see if they can delay the postdoc a year, or if there's another position, because you don't have that opportunity, particularly at the beginning of your career. You don't have that opportunity again. That's the time that you can build these unique experiences. So I would say go for it. And, the worst that happens is you turn down the fellowship and you'll really make someone else's day. So apply.
Yeah, I think having met so many different fellows, involved in different branches of the government at different agencies, everyone has gone on to do great work. They've gone back to academia. Some, went from a postdoc to the fellowship to an academic position, not just in a mid-career having tenure where it feels maybe like it's more safe to do it that way. Also people who've gone into private sector, nonprofit, going into the government. I don't think there's a lose here. It's at worst 1 year of your life, and maybe you don't like your placement, or maybe policy isn't what you thought it was, but it's a great opportunity, a great networking opportunity. You might just find your next job in the fellowship. And, they say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's really true once you get to actually dealing with your career. So knowing more people, knowing more opportunities will never hurt. So if you're here, a part of this chat, there's no reason not to apply. And as Ramon said, if you get it and decide ultimately that's not what you want to do, you can turn it down, make someone else's day, year, life, who knows?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Amina, Ramon, and Marguerite. I definitely appreciate it. You guys did fabulous today. And so for our audience members, thank you so much for participating today. And as mentioned, our application is open to November through November 1st. Visit the fellowship's website for details on the application. On the fellowship's website, you can also view chat recordings and register for other chats in this series. So don't forget, our next chat is what it's like to be a fellow, and that will take place August 14th from 3 to 4 p.m., and that's a Tuesday. But again, don't forget what it's like to be a fellow. If we did not answer any of your questions today, please send us an email at fellowships@AAAS.org, as shown on the slide. Again, thank you so much to our panelists today. and sharing your experiences.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And apologize for the background noise. I'm at a conference.
All right.